Hi, I'm Wendy Jensen. Welcome to another edition of our World War II A Look Back. Today we'll be talking to 9 World War II veterans. We have 3 people that were over in the Pacific, and the rest of the people, the other 6, were in Europe. So we have both theaters of action represented here. It'll be quite a few people talking, and we hope to have some pretty lively discussion. And so please stay tuned. Thank you.
Had been trained for European fighting, but then MacArthur got all excited because he was getting chased around over in the South Pacific, so he said, send me somebody. So we got on a train and went to San Francisco. But we always went as a unit. The 32nd Division stayed together until the end of the war, actually. Actually, it was a lieutenant from I Company that accepted the surrender of the general that was in charge in the Philippines. So we went from Australia, we went island hopping up the chain there. So that's about it.
Amazing. Next we have Clarence Vindedahl, or Junior as we call him. And I know you were in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And you were an engineer and a surveyor.
In the engineering. It's a little bit different than what these guys were going through. I was in a what's called a topographic survey company that did the groundwork for making maps. And I spent a few years in Manila. We were doing the groundwork for mapping. I remember we were mapping the West Coast at the time that some of the subs were spotted off the West Coast coming out of Japan.
Oh.
And they didn't have a real accurate map. All they had was aerial photographs of the West Coast, really. They didn't have a good accurate map. And we went out and did some of the survey work that had been gone through the West Coast. Well, some of the benchmarks we found were in 1856. We had to reestablish them. So, but we never did get done. They shipped us overseas.
Amazing.
Once we got overseas, we had to reestablish all the benchmarks over there, so that they could do their land surveys when the war was over. Otherwise, you couldn't even do a land survey, because everything moved.
From the bombing.
Yeah, I would imagine Europe had to go through the same thing.
Well, that'll be a real interesting perspective.
Yeah, I know when I got overseas, we went into a nice area. We had lived in tents, but our buildings that we worked in were all air conditioned.
Oh, wow.
And when we got there, we were told that we had a 10-year project. And I thought, boy, I don't want to be over here for 10 years.
No?
Whether they ever did get done or not, but...
So you didn't stay for the whole 10 years?
No, I didn't stay for the whole 10 years.
Good for you. Next we have Donald Jertson, or some people call him Duck. And he was in the Philippines. In fact, him and Junior ran into each other on an island. Which island was that?
Luzon.
Luzon, okay. And you were infantry.
38th Division.
38th Division.
That was Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky National Guards. I joined them. I was in the service from February 17th actually, of 43, and went to Camp Roberts, then down to Camp Livingston, and we shipped out through New Orleans and went through Panama. Actually, the ship we got on had come from Italy with wounded on it. So when we got on it, we thought we were going to Italy because we had all our winter clothes on. And instead of that, we went down through the Gulf of Mexico down to Panama. And it got so hot that they finally let us take the winter clothes off, and we threw them overboard. And we went to Panama, and then went to Hawaii, taking jungle and amphibious training. Then we took a little cruise over to the island of Maui, to practice landing, 5-day trip. Then we got back to Oahu and got on another ship and went to New Guinea. We stayed in New Guinea for quite a while, training more. And then we got on a ship and went to Leyte. We relieved some outfit on Leyte, and then we stayed there for quite a while. And then we made our landing on Luzon, January 29th of 1945. And then we had to open up the road to Manila. It was a mountain pass that we had to open up. It took us about 13 to 18 days to get it all clear. And then the big trucks could roll into Manila with the big guns and that to finish that off. And we had to go all around the island and mopping up operations.
Well, we're going to skip over to Chink now. We'll get back to your mopping up. That sounds kind of ghastly. We have Clarence Osland, or Chink, and he's been with us before. He was in Europe, and you were in the Army, and his brother is Leonard that we saw a little bit earlier. And you said that you ran into each other over in, where was it, Germany,
Munich,
France?
Germany, after
in Germany.
the war.
After the war?
Yeah.
What were the odds of that happening?
1 in a million, I guess. Because I was, I went in the service in the Army Infantry, 87th Infantry. And of course I went over to England and France and Germany and Belgium and Luxembourg and all them. And of course we had some tough times over there. And then after we got across the Rhine River, when we was over there, I got yellow jaundice and that. And so they sent me back to Nancy, France, in a hospital. And when I was back there, the Germans gave up. Well, of course, I'd never got any mail or anything from my brother or anybody because it was going up to the outfit. And if they sent it back to the hospital, I'd probably been gone. So they hung on to it, and then when I got back to camp there with my outfit, they gave me all my mail. And there, right on top was a letter from my brother. And he said he was down in Munich, Germany. So I asked the guy, how far is Munich, Germany? And he says 150 to 200 miles south. So one of the lieutenants there, somebody told the lieutenant about, and they were in the 45th, and they had some old buddies there. So I guess the captain too, he said something about, I hear you you got a brother in the 45th. I said, yes, I have. How'd you like to see him? Gee, I said, that would be wonderful. And so then a little while later, he come back and he says, say, could you be ready at 5 o'clock in the morning? I said, I'll be ready right now. I said, I'm ready to go. Well, we took off the next morning at 5:30, and we didn't, well, over there they have passwords and that, you know, so that you had to have the passwords. We never got the password or nothing. We took off in the Jeep. 2 lieutenants, I and the Jeep driver. And we went down there, and of course the Autobahn over there was all bombed out. All the bridges and that were bombed out, so we had to do detours and all this stuff. And then while we finally got down there, well, you get in a town like that, and these Army guys, engineers and that, brother was probably one of them, made signs. And you go to a corner and they got about 100 signs there, every one outfit this way and that way and all over the place. And finally we seen the 45th. And then we went there and we dropped the lieutenant's net out, and then we found out he was a different spot there. He was in a beautiful spot.
Oh, yeah.
It was compared to what we had.
Yeah. We were at an airport, like, in it was surrounded, well, you got pictures of it,
Well,
surrounded by big buildings
it's
all the way
like
around.
a block, and it was a building all around the block, and they had drill fields in the
Yeah,
center.
yeah, and that was all cement.
They had swimming pools there and everything.
Really?
Yeah, just a recreation area.
Well,
Did the Germans build that for you, or what?
No. They took it over as theirs.
I'm
We
just
just
kidding.
took over for a little rest period there.
But that's how I got down to see him there. Gee, we really had a good reunion.
Oh,
Boy, he was shaking like a leaf, and I couldn't even talk. And,
To see both of us alive, you know.
yeah.
oh, I'm so glad.
Because I could have gotten killed when I ran into a machine gun nest.
Yeah.
So then after
German machine gun nest.
that, we got shipped back to the States here, and we were going over the Pacific because we were one of the youngest, latest ones over there.
Join the crowd.
Of course, I was in the hospital when the Europe gave up, and then I got home and I was on furlough, and I was home in Stoughton here when the Japanese gave up, and oh, it was a relief. I didn't have to go to Japan. Then I got discharged.
Wow. Yeah, I think that was kind of unfair, these guys they had to go both places.
Well, we was going to go if they wouldn't have
That's
gave
where
it.
I was headed for too when we got
Unless
to
you had
it.
enough points.
Yeah.
You had
Well, they
enough
took
points.
us out of the deep freeze and they was going to put us in the sweatshop.
Thaw us out.
Oh, wow. Leonard, would you like to tell us more about running into the machine gun nest?
Well, I was with the combat engineers, and I was in the headquarters company, and it didn't mean that we didn't get out into the field. And we had a three-wheel motorcycle, and it had a box on the back of it, and we were going to go to a forward, what do you call it, a place where we were going to have our headquarters again. And so we were loaded up with all kinds of telephone equipment, wires and telephones and so forth, and we set out on the road. And we knew on a map where we were supposed to go. Well, we took off, and pretty soon we coming up over this hill, and as we got over the top of this hill, we're coming down, the machine guns start shooting at us. And so he turned the motorcycle, and we both went down into the ditch. And so we stayed down in the gutter there for a while, and pretty soon they started dropping mortars in on us. And I says, George, we can't stay here. They're going to drop one right on top of us. And there was a kind of a hedgerow along the side there, so we crawled through the hedgerow, and then we got up and we started running like mad. And I said, George, I'm hit. He says, can you make it? And I says, yeah, I can make it. All I felt was a little jerk in my belt there. It hit right just about where the hip bone is there, in between the hip bone and the intestines. And we jumped into a shell hole, and we sat there for a while. And we thought, and things were getting awfully quiet. And so we thought, well, maybe we better get up and see if we can't run back towards we didn't know we were in front of our infantry. We were way out in front of the point of the infantry.
Oh, boy.
And so we went down this field, and pretty soon we saw this group of soldiers coming up through, and I said, hey, there's our infantry. So we headed towards them, and so when we got down there, they put me in an ambulance and sent me back to a field hospital, and then my buddy, he stayed with them, so he was going to show them where this machine gun nest was. And so they went up a little ways, and then they made a pincher room movement around. When they got there, the machine gun and all those troops were gone. You could see where the shells were all spent and so forth. But then I went back to a field hospital. I was operated on. They cut me down through the center here and opened me up and took whatever blood and so forth was inside there and checked my intestines and so forth. They weren't hit. My hip bone wasn't hit. It was what they called a $1 million wound.
Oh, really?
But then I was out of service for about 6 months at the time. But then I had to go through rehabilitation, and got back to my service and my outfit, and then we headed back. This was during the winter, so I was back in Salerno, Italy, where it was nice and warm. So I spent the winter down there. But after I got back, we went back, and then we started heading out for Germany, and we got into there, and we were kind of following. Who's the blood and guts general? Patton. Well, we were following him. The only thing is, he would go through. The Germans would let them go through, but then they'd come around and get us, back of us. But we did lose an awful lot of men, though, because they did pinch around the tanks.
That's a picture.
So then we went into Germany, and then we went down into Austria when you went, and then the war was over.
What is that picture?
Is that the one where we met?
That's a
Right when
Leonard?
he's,
When he was-
after
when he was
he got out of the
recuperating?
hospital. Then he put a little ink spot
Ink
right
spot
there
where I was
where it
shot.
says, that's where I got shot.
Yeah.
It's my $1 million wound.
Yeah.
5 points.
Yeah.
5 points, yeah.
Yeah.
We started out by going to Iceland, and it didn't sound like any of the rest of you guys had that privilege or that experience. So
Privilege.
I can tell you a little bit about it. In the first place, Iceland is not nearly as bad as it would sound by the name and everything. They're illiterate people. They know what's going on, and they did. This is 60 years ago. We went over there in the fall of 1941, and of course now that's 60 years this fall.
That was before Pearl Harbor, too, wasn't it?
Yes, it was before Pearl Harbor. We were the first American unit to go overseas, and to as far as we took the place of the English who were on Iceland at that time, and they had been there for a year or two because they were protecting the shipping lanes and so forth, so we just took over. Had a bunch of Nissen huts up there that for this our division, and they would be relieved. I mean, they'd take off. They were damn glad to get out of there and go back to England, because there isn't a heck of a lot to do in Iceland. It wasn't at that time, but it's better off now. But fundamentally, it hasn't changed that much. But we were there 2 years, and our purpose and mission, of course, was to keep the shipping lanes open for shipping that was going to England and other places like Norway and so forth. And the other was it gave the ships a chance to go into the fjords in Iceland, just like they are in Norway. And those big ships could go right in there, 30, 40 miles in, and great for, kind of being out of sight, so to speak, from the Germans. And by the way, they were in Norway, and while we were there, there was 1 or 2 smaller planes that would come over every day just to check on the people that were in Iceland, to see how things were going, and if there was any change. If they saw a big battleship or a cruiser or something in a harbor, they would certainly notify, somebody back at the headquarters. So, but getting to the weather, there isn't near as much snow in Iceland as there is right here in Wisconsin. Not nearly. But they have a lot of freezing rain. It's kind of like Seattle or Bergen, Norway, or something like that. And it freezes practically. I mean, you don't see it melting very often. It's just freezing layers. And they get winds there on that island of up to 90 miles an hour. That's the toughest part of that whole affair is the wind. So it wasn't much fun, and it's light all day in the summertime, and it's dark all 24 hours at night. So you're just traveling around like it's night all the time, or you can read a newspaper at 12 o'clock midnight in summer. It's those big contrasts. The sun goes down and goes right back up. So that's strange about it, too. But it isn't that bad. And I might say that the fact that I could speak Norwegian helped quite a bit. Now, Icelandic is even... it's a little like Danish, and it's a little something like Swedish. But it really is that old Norwegian that during the Viking times, and it didn't change much. So I couldn't hardly understand the Icelandic language itself, but it wasn't hard to find some Icelandic people who could speak English. And then the fact that they could speak English, and they do trade back and forth with Norway, a lot of them also could speak Norwegian. So I would speak Norwegian to them, and they could understand that, and then they in turn would be speaking Icelandic to the people that, if you were trying to convey a message to the people that lived there. So it worked out pretty good. I translated quite often for some of the units. And then, of course, then the Pearl Harbor came along, which made everything official, because we were up there before that. And then Roosevelt, of course, could declare war on Germany, too, and then things really got active as far as the ships, and a lot of submarines, German submarines, were in that area. And that was part of our mission, is to report any sighting of submarines and so forth, and then keep the lanes open, I should say. And there was a small airport in Reykjavik that couldn't handle big airplanes and that, but they did have small ones, and they were being shipped to England, made here in the States, and they had to stop in Iceland in order to refuel. They just couldn't make it that far. As a matter of fact, some of them went Greenland, Iceland, Ireland, and like that. But these were fighter planes, and England needed them very badly, you know, during that big war that they had trying to knock London out of the picture. So that was part of. Oh, and one of the, I was on that small airport with a unit there taking. I was on duty at that particular time, and General Marshall, he was the wheel behind Roosevelt, you know, in those days, and he was going to England, so he stopped there, and I got to meet him and say hello to him, and you know, that's even bigger than General Patton, you know, that time. Anyway, that was one of the highlights of. We had constant people, you know, the soldiers were taking care of that, and especially when they knew he was coming through, there were all kinds of people, you know, watching out that nothing would sabotage or anything would happen. Well, anyway, I'm still in Iceland, and of course from there we went down to England, stayed there a short while, and by that time I would say that Roosevelt and Churchill were kind of stacking up divisions in that area, getting ready for the, you know, the big push into France. So we were, the 5th was sent to Ireland, North Ireland, that is. And they had some in Scotland, they had some strewn around England, all preparing for the Normandy invasion. And that 9 months in Germany, I should say North Ireland, was some of the best times that we ever had. They are the friendliest people in the world. Golly, they were fun. They loved fun, and the strange thing about it is that they can't get along with each other. You know, even now, the Catholics and the Protestants, but they were Protestants up in North Ireland. I never had so much fun, you know. They wanted to sing and dance, and they'd invite you to their homes. It couldn't be nicer. And when they talk about the Irish green, you know, the greener green, that is the most beautiful sight to see a valley in that hue of green. It's just beautiful. And I've never seen it copied here in this country. There must be some reason why that grass is that brighter green than it is here. Well, to go on from there, of course, then we were one of the divisions. As long as I've got Mike, I might just well tell you more about the 5th then, because we were there that long, and we went into the Normandy invasion. We were not there on D-Day, but we came in D+5, and there was still an awful lot of action there, you know, but not nearly as much as D-Day. Did any of you guys see that movie, you know, that was made a year or so ago about D-Day? Yeah, that gives you an idea how rough that thing was on D-Day. And of course, I wasn't there, but it was bad enough. I was really damn glad that I didn't go in on D-Day, but we made it shortly afterwards. And we got in okay, which is a miracle to begin with. Getting back to the D-Day, my younger brother, I don't know if any of you knew Clarence.
I did.
How? You know, he was class of 37, I think it was. And for some reason, he started way back when he started. They transferred any cavalry into tanks, and he originally was with cavalry. I don't know why, but he wound up in the tank unit, and went into not Omaha but Utah Beach on D-Day. And holy smokes, having seen that, I didn't realize it was bad enough for us, but when you think of the slaughter, you know, on that beachhead that day, it's amazing that they ever got up that cliff, you know, with the Germans looking right down on them and pounding them with heavy artillery, airplanes going back and forth, strafing, you know. It's a bad situation. But anyway, speaking of Clarence, he went in on D-Day, and when we got into these little boats, you know, that take you in, and then they open up, and you, like they did in the Pacific, and then you get off the boat, and they can't get you right into shore. It's about 100 yards or more, and you have to walk right into the water. You know, it's up to your, and you hold your weapons up above your head. And there's still artillery coming in, but not nearly like as bad as it was, you know, when on D-Day. But anyway, we got into shore, and I got to a place where there was a little cover. There isn't any at the shoreline. You know, so you're taking, I mean, they can see it right, looking right down, but they didn't when I was there, because they had already taken those pillboxes and those bunkers up on top of that cliff. So anyway, to make this a little shorter, we're just getting organized. The battalion commander came over and he said, I've got some instructions as to where we go and what we do, and all of a sudden I heard somebody say, "Uddy, is that you?" And I looked over there, and here was Clarence. He came up, and you know, and I hadn't seen him for about 3 years. I'd been in Iceland, etc. Didn't have any idea that he was in the 4th Division, which was one of the that you mentioned, the 28th. They were one of the ones that went in on D-Day, and out of there was the 1st and the 28th, wasn't it? 29th it was, yeah. So anyway, talk about a reunion, and all these guys were asking questions, because he'd been there all of 5 days, or you know, that he was a veteran as far as that, what the situation was on the beach. But anyway, I was real surprised to see him, because we hadn't had I hadn't any idea that he was there. And then to top it all off, I looked at him and I said, "Clarence, you've got my parka. Where the hell did you, how come?" And he said, "Well, you'd sent it home, and I didn't want to see it sitting there, so I took it with me, because I knew where I was going to be in France." And I said, "Well, give it to me, boy. I can use it." And so that was the punchline, is that he took it off, but he stayed there that night. And the reason that he found me was that the red diamond is the insignia for the 5th Division, and he had seen that on a couple of Jeeps that were running back and forth, and of course on your sleeve. And so that way he traced it down, and we hadn't been on shore much over an hour before Clarence found me, and we talked all night, you know, before he took off again, and then I didn't see him again until we got back to Stoughton. Well, that's as far as we've got. I can tell you that we went from there, of course, across France and Luxembourg, like you did, and got into Belgium. We were south of when the Bulge came along. We were south of that. This was Patton's 3rd Army, you know, going east. And we got involved in that we pinched them off. If you know, we were coming from the south and somebody else from the north in the Belgium area. punched that off, and lots of Germans surrendered that during that time.
A number of divisions that were together there following Patton. Now, you said something about the 28th Division?
I'm not, I think I was thinking of the 29th, but you had mentioned the 28th.
Okay.
The 29th is a Pennsylvania group, but maybe the 28th was in, I don't know if they made D-Day,
It
though.
could have been. And then there was the 34th, the 36th, and then us, the 45th. All of us were following Patton.
Yeah,
That was
that's
after
right.
D-Day,
Yeah, I know what you mean, because there were an awful lot of divisions that were, they were spread out, and then of course you had
Most of us
Montgomery.
were the amphibious divisions too. We always made the landings.
Uh-huh.
In fact, we made 4 landings, one on Sicily, one at Salerno, one on Yanzu beachhead, and then southern France.
Oh. That reminds me of the fact that our regiment, the 10th, counts 12 river crossings, and river crossings are about the toughest thing to handle of anything, because the enemy has already chosen where where he stops at the river but goes across, and then he's looking down at you as you try to make, even at night they had lights and various things. So and our division, which our regiment, I have a manual on that and the history. And they said that we must have been good at it, because we made 12 of them. And there are a lot of rivers small, some are small. But that's one of the toughest infantry things to handle, is because you're sitting duck out there on the water until, you can get across. Well, that's about it for now.
How did you get across? Did you have to swim?
What you do, some would swim. We use all the small boats that from the area, and then as soon as the engineers can get there, and with their inflated boats, you manage to get across just by numbers. I mean, just get, and once you get over across, then you got it made, because then you're on the same side that they are, and you got enough firepower to move them out of there. But the initial part of it, where you have to get across the river, is I'm sure you've done that. And
That's really scary too, when you go over to pontoon bridges with these great big trucks and jeeps loaded with stuff. You're going like that in the current of the Rhine River,
I know what you mean.
It's like big Y, and
I know what you mean. We had a couple
I
of
was ready to jump off.
6x6s that were full of ammunition going across Moselle River, and that's quite a large river. And it got hit by, I don't know what, or maybe mortar or whatever, and it started to tilt. And it was about an angle like that.
Yeah.
And everybody was saying, we have to do something about that. We have to get that out of there and get it across. It was closer to the other side than it was to our side. And I was chosen to go out and figure out how to get that thing. They had a line, either chain or a big cord that was initially put over there so that you keep it from going downstream. Yeah. But that had loosened up and everything too, so we had to get some way. It wasn't me, but I was telling the guy how to do it, And we got the thing hooked up again, so that we were able to pull it to the far shore after we'd had a few people over there. And then keep it from losing all that ammunition. We had food on there for the guys that are over there and everything else. So that happens. Those river crossings are nasty. But that's part of the war too,
Yeah, we was waiting on to build that pontoon bridge across the Rhine River. Well, we didn't have much to do, then.
No.
And so they had a lot of old boats and that alongside the shore there. The Rhine River's pretty big and swift.
Don't say you went fishing, though.
That's right. I found a fish pole and I went fishing, so I could say I went. Any of you guys went fishing in the Rhine River?
Boy, that's really
That's the only bridge that they didn't dynamite in time, and so they were able to cross that thing while it was still.
Remagen you're talking about
Yes,
now.
yeah. But that was, as far as I remember, that was the Rhine River.
Yeah.
And that's saving an awful lot of lives and times and what engineers would have to do. So they made a big mistake when they didn't get that done in time.
They should write that up so a Stoughton boy fishes the Rhine River during World War II.
Yes,
A real sportsman.
When we crossed, we couldn't take time to go fishing. I'll tell you, because
But the first guys that went across the Rhine River, though, they went in them small boats and that stuff, salt boats and that stuff. They're the ones that had it tough. They had
That's
to
right.
establish a beachhead on the other side for us when they built pontoon bridge across.
that's right.
I was at that Remagen Bridge. That was something to see.
Yeah, you tell a little bit about. Well, how about telling all of the cigarettes that you were discharging and stuff like that?
Oh,
I was in the PX service, and,
Oh, you
and when
were?
all these guys were fighting wars, I was selling cigarettes and candy wares.
They were necessary too, the PX.
We had to have that too.
You bet. But he was following us at a little distance, and that was part of the whole
Yeah.
picture. And I'm sure you got close enough so you got involved in a few.
The only
things.
Germans I saw were either dead or they were PWs.
Well, they were coming back as prisoners. Huh? Yeah.
Well, we didn't have fish poles, but we would throw grenades in the river.
No, I suppose.
Was that right?
Oh, yeah, that worked
Fish
too.
just come floating up and you pick them up.
Yeah, there were so many cigarettes, and boy, I regret, so does everybody else, especially Doug, that, they were so damn easy to get. They were free, cartons at a time, and I'm glad I quit in '63. That saved my lungs, because I was sure smoking all I could. You have to do something when you're uptight and you're reaching and get another cigarette. The government didn't do us any good, boy, by giving that stuff away.
No.
they didn't.
They always say, smoke if you got them, huh?
Yeah,
Smoke if you got them.
yeah, that's right.
We sold the cigarettes a nickel a pack. And then you got 4 free ones with all your K rations.
Yeah, you're right.
Isn't,
And if you were in
I don't-
combat, you didn't pay anything for your cigarettes. So that's
I sure
what,
never
that was
paid
what
a
your pay
nickel.
was.
Yeah.
Well, cigarettes is better than money.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
We was saving them up and putting them in the trailer in our Jeep.
Listen, you don't,
This over.
you don't want to tell everybody what you were doing to those cigarettes. I mean, if you were bartering.
yeah.
Bartering.
All kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Depends on what you needed. Oh,
No.
Did you barter in the Philippines too with cigarettes?
God, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We never
Cigarettes are better than money.
had a price on them. But then,
We got them for nothing.
yeah,
In Italy too.
sure. But
Especially if you didn't smoke.
we shouldn't have even been
Yeah.
given cigarettes.
you
Now
didn't
we know
smoke.
it now, of course.
Yeah.
I paid 50 cents a carton at Goose Bay.
Talking
How
about
your
Italy,
first? You want to tell us a little bit?
Leonard was up at Anzio and I was just a little bit below that. Of course, we didn't know
We
each.
don't know. We didn't know.
We didn't know that
No.
we were both in Italy.
You
Well,
didn't.
the other
Yeah,
ones
you
was-
didn't realize you were both
that close
No,
together.
Yeah.
because we were close enough. We could hear the rumbling from up at Anzio, all the racket, but we didn't. I didn't know he was there.
It was.
But where did I see you? Was that in England? Then?
I saw you in England, yes.
Yeah, that's right. You were
Talking about all this tough duty, that reminds me of when our outfit went overseas to start with the 32nd Division. So we went to Australia, and we found out that the Australian Army and they were over in the Middle East. So they didn't have anybody left there, and they thought the Japs were coming down there, so we were supposed to defend half of Australia. Well, we thought we had it made, but it didn't last long.
You were the home guard then.
Yeah, right.
Australia.
That's what they called the 29th Division in England, the home guard.
Is that right?
We got beer ration too. We get about a case every once in a while. I don't know why or how.
You mean that 3-2?
Yeah, it didn't make any difference.
Yeah, it's still beer.
It tasted like beer. Anyway.
And down New Guinea, a lot of the guys, they would get drunk and fight, so they had to stop that. So they give us 3 cans twice a week.
Is that?
So I dug a hole in the ground by my bunk, and I put them down in there to cool as cool as I could. It was pretty hot. and then save them up and have a party.
Didn't Junior join you for a party?
Well, when I went over to see him, I got up to his tent and I hollered, "Duck." And when I got into the tent, he was standing there with 2 cans of beer, one in each hand. All open and ready to start drinking, see?
Already.
But that's all he had.
Yeah. But
Just drawing beer for my squad.
Yeah.
And those guys didn't care what kind of beer they got, but I always tried to get Milwaukee beer.
sure.
And I just set the case under my bunk, and he came in the door. I didn't even know he was on Luzon.
Oh, my gosh.
Then he said, I got a Jeep or a truck or
Yeah,
something.
I had a Jeep
he
there.
said, come on back to my outfit. So we went down there, and he said, you want to go swimming? And I said, sure, where? He said, we'll go over in the officer's pool. Well, I said, what if we get caught? And Junior says, when you just got a swimming suit on, nobody knows if you're an officer or not.
That's a worry.
That's pretty clever.
Well, you got sunburned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, so.
Was anyone here an officer?
I was. Sure.
You were? Ralph, we haven't heard much from you.
He's waiting.
He's waiting for his
It's
moment.
all very interesting.
We were in a different world than these guys, you know.
He was in the same kind of outfit I was in Italy, but he was in England.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't freeze anyhow.
To start with, over in the jungles, we didn't like the Air Force at all.
I
And you know
suppose,
why?
yeah.
The fighting was so close, and they'd try and give us a little help from the Air Force, and we got bombed just as much as the enemy did.
Why, sure.
Had to call that off, but you couldn't
That can
blame
happen, boy.
Blame it on the weather.
it on the weather.
That's
Well,
what
they
it
tried
was.
that over in Europe too, where
Oh, were
they
there?
shoot up a line of colored flak.
Yep.
And we were supposed to, once we got past that line, we could drop.
Yep.
But we got a general one day, one of our generals, I guess. So I think they kind of quit that.
Yeah.
Ooh. That wouldn't be
We had to
popular.
lay ribbons out, and then they just had to be sure and drop the bombs on the right side.
It's kind of hard to see from 4 miles up.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, you get up there 20,000 feet or better, it's pretty hard to see.
You brought a couple pictures for us,
Yeah,
Jake.
it's gonna, like I say, it was fun to listen to you guys and the ground troops. But like Hutter was in the Air Force and I flew, but I never realized what these guys are doing. They'd load up these airplanes at night, work all night, putting anything from 100-pounders into 2,000-pound bombs in, you know. But it kind of reminds me of what my dad used to say when he was a bricklayer and he had to labor. He says, you know, they mix the mortar and haul the brick up there on the scaffolding, and I do all the work. So I was out one of the laborers. He was loading up the airplane
Yeah, I would say,
and checking all the guns and stuff. So, and of course, he had the ground crews and taking care of it. But I started. I might as well go back a ways. I was going to school at the university, and I started in 1941 in the fall. Then they came in and says, join the Army Air Force and stay in school until the president needs you. So I jumped on that. But then in March, early part of March of '43, the president needed us. So and I just finished a semester, and I was going into the second semester of my sophomore year. I didn't crack a book. I had straight F's after 6 weeks. I'm up there pounding on the door. Get me out of here. I don't want that recorded. So we went, Gene Hansen, you remember Ralph Hansen,
Yes.
his printing shop?
yeah, his son.
Yeah, his son, Ralph and his wife, they drove us down, I think, down to Illinois, and the weather was so bad we took a bus and we went to Decatur, Illinois. And we got on a train there the following day and went to San Antonio, the classification center. A whole bunch of guys in these old railroad cars sleeping in the aisles and the whole works. And I remember the first thing we got in the truck and they took us to the base, and of course there's a garbage detail go by and you guys will be sorry, you know, you all heard that one. So we went to classification store, we took all the tests, mental and coordination and all that stuff. And from after that, we went across the road with a pre-flight for 10 weeks where we It was kind of the class system like West Point. You know, you could only sit on 4 inches of store and everything. Your chair, and then it was everything double time. And the upper class would come down and rack you back on, that sort of thing. But that went on for 10 weeks. Then we went up to Fort Worth primary at Hicks Field at Fort Worth, where we learned to fly an airplane, to keep it in the air. And there was a 175-horse Fairchild PT-19. When we got through with that, then we went to basic, where we flew the WWII Vibrator, which is a 450-horse. It was like stepping from a Model T into a Cadillac, Then we got into instrument flying and all, upgraded. And from there we went to, we had a choice. We could either go single engine or multi-engine. So I picked multi-engine. Ended up in Altus, Oklahoma, and we had training there. And I think I got my wings. We graduated January 7th, 1944. And we came home on leave for 21 days, which was a great time.
Yeah.
And then I had to go back to Fort Worth, Tarrant Field, which is Carswell now. I guess they've closed it down and for transition into B-24s. And I don't know if you can pick this up or not. Might be a good time to show. This is the instrument panel on a B-24.
Look at that.
Looks complicated.
It sure does.
I imagine walking into this big giant airplane. I thought, how the hell am I ever going to fly that? I mean, how the heck am I ever going to fly that?
How in the heck?
It was 60 hours before I flew it in the left seat. I think we got probably had 120 hours in that. Then we were switched. Have you got it? Then we were shipped out to Pueblo, Colorado for cruise training, where we picked up a crew. And I remember the first day we went out on the flight line, our radio operator, who happened to be a washed-out cadet, not that he couldn't fly, but he was screwing up, buzzing or something, they kicked him out. He goes up to the co-pilot, he says, how many hours you got on this airplane? Co-pilot looked at him, he said, I've never been in it before. So we weren't overtrained.
No.
But anyway, we got through that phase training where we practiced bombing and formation and all other stuff, cross countries. And when they shipped us up to Lincoln, Nebraska, where we picked up a brand new airplane and checked it out. And we left at about midnight and flew up to Omaha, and we ended up in Manchester, New Hampshire. Stayed overnight. And the next day we flew from there to Goose Bay, Labrador. Then we stayed a couple days there, and I remember we were going to take off at midnight and was checking the mags on it. One of them went out, and so we had to go back and left the next night. But we flew to Iceland.
That's what I thought,
We
yeah.
landed in Iceland. You said a small airport.
Well, yeah, they say that was small. That's the only one they had when we were there.
Oh,
But they were starting to build a new one called Keflavik.
Yeah, that might have been where we landed.
That's where it is, because it's a peninsula that goes right out from the capital city, and that can handle any size plane now. But and they were already. It was initially, it was getting started and so forth. So that's
I
the
had a lot
reason.
of runways because I was a little tired after about 11 hours, and they said land at 03, which is 30 degrees. I was lying up on 30, which is 300. On the approach, and they called me, so I had to make a turn, and we finally landed. Then we landed, and we followed a Jeep. I think we followed them for a half an hour to get back to the civilization.
Yes, that's true. It's about.
Anyhow, we left there a day or so later, and we flew over, hit Stornoway, Scotland, come in, and down the Irish Sea over Isle of Man, and landed in Valley, Wales, where we left the airplane. And from there, we went over to Ireland, across from Belfast, for a couple of weeks of indoctrination in the UK. And when we were through with that, they put us in the 17 and flew us to our bomb group. And we had more training there. We flew practice missions over England and stuff. And when we went on the first mission, I flew co-pilot for a seasoned crew. But anyhow, Our first mission was in August, about August 23rd of 44. And we were lucky we were over there late enough where we had fighter cover. The guys that were over there earlier went beyond the fighter cover. They really caught it. I completed 35 missions on February 23rd or 4th, I guess, in 45. And we had some in it. Well, Chick was down in the Bulge. You were down in the Bulge?
Yes, you
I was
bet.
down there Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, 26th and 27th, but only got within 4 miles. You know? And you were talking about Patton.
We got closer than that.
You were talking about Patton running out of gas around Metz.
Yes.
Yeah.
They put drop tanks from the fighters in our bomb bays, and we hauled gas over to him. We landed at a German field.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about cigarettes. Well, the crew, my co-pilot was sick. He always had the flu or something. I wanted him to, we had to move the airplanes forward, you know, so they could unload.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go with it in the town with the crew, but my navigator and radio operator and who the heck, the flight engineer, the three of them went into town with a carton of cigarettes that I bought in Goose Bay. And they came back. They were flying. I don't think they were touching the ground when they got back, and they brought a couple of bottles of champagne back, and they really had quite a town. I won't go into details on that, but I found them the next morning in the back end of the airplane and with engine covers, sleeping like a bunch of little kittens. But anyhow, we got in the air. Next day we flew low about 1,000 feet going out of England. Come out around Boulogne, I think, where we hit the, and then went up. Come in over the White Cliffs.
From Dover, yeah.
Right down the Thames River in London. But then we got up in a wash up there, northeast Anglia. It was cloudy, so I had to let down, make an instrument landing, or let down. We broke out at 300 feet, indicated. Made landfall. The navigator was up in the nose, and he says, "I saw the eyeballs in those ducks down there." I says, "It's time to come back up."
That's close enough, isn't it?
I know we went through Norwich. I had to make a turn to miss the cathedral in there. And we got back to our base in a lousy weather, and a friend of mine had overshot the runways, and so we couldn't land. We sent us to another field. And we landed there, and I says, "We'll stay overnight." And the guy said, "Heck, you will." So I give us some gas, and away we went again. But we dropped the airplane off, and they finally trucked us back. So we did a lot besides just combat.
Sure.
You know, and there were some exciting experiences on combat. We had a Purple Heart, and one of the guys, the gunners, got nicked with some flak. An engine shot out a couple of times.
You bet.
But, you know, the airplanes we were flying in combat, they were really taken care of. You know, they 300 or 400 hours they put a new engine in. Or in training, we had 2,000 hours on them, and we were practicing manually lowering their gears. I couldn't keep the airplane in the air with 3 engines because they were no power. But as far as, I don't know, like I say, any missions after 56 years, they kind of blend together, but we had a few of them. I think the worst thing that bothers when we were stood down for a week or so, and then you got to thinking about this, we're going to have to fly again, but once you got going.
Sure.
It's kind of interesting, too, that the Bulge were stood down for a week or two because we couldn't, the bad weather, we couldn't get down for you guys.
Yeah, and Bulge was
So the guys would warm up the engines every day and run them, but when the day we had the mission, we went out, and when you check the mags, it was only supposed to drop 50 RPMs. Well, this was dropping more than 100, so I called the crew chief up in there. He said, "Don't worry about it. When you put it on full rich, it'll clear itself up." And I looked at him and said, "You want to go along?" "No way." So he was right, you know. The weather over in England, there were a lot of times we were on instruments before we got off the ground. And to climb up, And we had 450 airplanes milling around, you know, but we had certain headings to take to get out over the wash and make it get up, and you'd form above the clouds. And I remember one day I was talking to a guy. I was supposed to fly off his wing, and we were kidding about it. And lead airplane, and they had 2 airplanes off the wing. That was a lead element, and right below that was another element of 3. That's, you know, the second element would be flying right under the lead. And that's where he was flying. I was going to fly his right wing. And well, I got up there a little early. It was 13,500, and beautiful, clear day. And I sat back about 100 yards, and I see him coming up. There was another airplane. I don't know how they did it, but he slid into it, and the wing went off, and he went spinning down. And the other guy went down, and I think out of the 2 crews, there's only 2 that survived. But and that didn't end it, because I called the lead, and I said, I'll pull up, lead, fly the slot. We made 1 circle around, and here comes another squadron off to the right. Everybody tucked up. We went through like a deck of cards. And we hadn't left England yet, you know. I think we were going to Hamburg that day, and I don't remember the rest of that mission. So, well, when we finished up, I don't know if you can get in this. I brought a picture of the crew after one of the missions. It's not the best.
It looks all right.
Put your finger on yourself, though, where you are.
Well, you can see the good-looking one.
You turn it there.
One with all the hair.
Yeah, this way or that?
Right there.
I think that was after a mission to Hamburg. We went 4 times to Hamburg and about 3 or 4 times to Magdeburg, and plus a lot of other places, you know.
You know what flak is then, don't
That's where
you?
you dropped your stuff.
I say, you know what flak is then, don't you?
Oh, yeah, we had good fighter cover, but they were around.
They said it was so thick you could walk on it.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, it got when you could feel the concussion and hear them banging around, you know. We had one go right through the wing one day, about the only place it couldn't hurt. So,
Especially over Ploetzi, Romania.
yeah, well, we didn't get there. The group was there, but
That's where our
Over in the Pacific, then it was putting all carrier flying. What was the biggest plane that they could handle?
B-25 off a carrier?
B-25, they bombed
Off a carrier or what?
Off a carrier,
just that one
25, I
time.
think, is it?
I suppose.
They bombed Tokyo, wasn't it? Off that one.
No.
That was-
Well, you know, Guadalcanal and all those places. That was all carrier.
That was when they were trying to get even with for Pearl Harbor. They did use B-25s off them.
Well, just to give you an example of one of our missions, I think it was our 4th mission. We were bombing a Tiger Tank Works at Cassel, I don't know how they pronounce it. And I noticed the squadron, a group ahead, there was a bunch of flak, and then there wasn't anything. So I didn't think anything about that. And we couldn't get the when you took off on the 24th, if it was wet, sometimes the doors would go up and they'd freeze. So the radio operator's down on the catwalk kicking the doors. And the bombardier up there, he pulled his headset off so I couldn't talk to him. And all of a sudden we got a barrage flak all over the damn place. And the radio operator kicked the door open, the bombs slid along his legs on the way out. But all this thing, the number 3 engine was spewing oil all over the place. It got hit in the engine, and it gets a little exciting, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Was that the worst experience you had in
Well,
flying?
that's just one of them.
That's just one of the worst ones.
Well, yeah. They're all exciting.
No doubt about
I want
that.
you to hold up your jacket that I asked you to bring. Maybe I
Yeah,
can help you.
He still got his fight
My
jacket.
nose gunner was
He still got his
pretty
fight
good
jacket.
artist. So he did this work on my jacket. It's pretty stiff.
Yeah.
Old 77, isn't it?
Oh, yeah,
Nice.
that's
77. We called ourselves Old 77 because we're the 77th crew at Pueblo where we trained. But each one of these is supposed to, bomb is supposed to be a mission. And
Oh, yeah.
of course, we didn't have the good paint. It's getting pretty well worn.
What a souvenir.
That's quite a souvenir, is right.
Yeah.
Ralph, does it still fit?
Should we try it? Yeah, I need some help. though.
Sure, I can't even get mine in.
I got a better-
That should, Ralph, that should go in the Stoughton Museum, really. when you get through with it.
Oh, that's awful tight.
Oh,
Got a
boy.
heavy shirt on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can't get mine on.
Mine either. I think
Darn thing shrunk.
I got it, that's pretty good.
Yes,
You know,
it
these
is.
are the coldest jackets they ever made, though.
I thought they had.
Very good, Brian
That's
Elliott.
very
fur
good. You got
liners or
that on.
something
My
like
God.
that.
No. Of course, everything. And Marion, we were painting the house. He was using it to paint with. I got paint all over.
Better not let her do that anymore.
At the back.
That's
That should really go to Stoughton Museum.
History, you gotta can't
Yeah.
spoil that.
Yeah, and you got the swastika there at the bottom.
You were mentioning what the attitude of the English people were over there during the war.
Yes.
When we got over there. Well, they were pretty well beat up. You get down in London, just blocks leveled.
Yeah.
And of course, they were rationed and everything. But I met some nice people. I was walking around down in London, and this guy came and he says he lived in Cleveland. He was back in England. Took me down an alley, and there was an old beat-up ruins. And you heard this. What is it? Something in lemons. Something of St. Clemens. Oranges and lemons.
Oh,
Well, he says that's where the knights used to meditate before they'd go.
I see.
So, but then also went into a little open sandwich shop, ordered a sandwich, and they were cut in half, and I was eating one half of it, and I didn't see too much back there. And the waitress came up and she took it off my plate. Says, "You don't need that." And she was right. You know, they were short of food. And we'd go to Regent Palace just off of Piccadilly, a nice hotel. You wouldn't get any meat. It was all Brussels sprouts and potatoes and stuff like that. Now we went back, Marion and I and my daughter went back to England 2 years ago, June. Everybody I think we met that knew that found out that we were over there in the service, they thanked us.
Oh.
You know. And we got to get, they've got a 2nd Air Division place in the library over there. Norwich, 2nd Air Division, that was the B-24s. They were located around Norwich, so that was kind of the home base where they'd go. And they started a 2nd Air Division, what you call it?
Museum? Memorial?
Kind of a memorial room. And I corresponded with them before we came over there. They gave me the hotels to stay. And they had a driver there at 10 o'clock in the morning to drive us around. It turned out to be an old Air Force, or not an Air Force, but a commercial pilot. Took us out to the old base, which is pretty restricted because they make the Lotus sports car out there. But they've taken the old control tower and made it into a lounge. Then there was a little room with all the antiques and stuff. And I noticed the guy's name, Bud Doyle, signed in there, and they took us over to the old Catholic chapel, which served as a gymnasium and the office for the priest. And on the wall there was a painting of Christ on the cross, you know, the crucifix. And I see Doyle's name signed in there again. So when we got back into Norwich, we went to the museum there, and then we had him call and found him. It turned out he was with the group from the start, and he was a priest's assistant for 1.5 years, so he knew the whole history of the deal. And he was quite a painter. And he sent me a picture about like that with a bunch of B-24s on it. And I got that hanging in our living room. But we had quite a conversation. And of course, this commercial pilot, he had a few stories to tell. But what you're talking about might be interesting. Is it a Green Beret, or do they have the black berets over there during World War II? Is it the green? There was a special units over there. Was it the Green Berets?
Yeah, Green Berets, yeah.
Well, they had a guy in the Green Berets that he had Purple Hearts and a bunch of medals, and somehow they got him signed to our group. And boy, he didn't have a good thing to say about the Air Force. They put him in armament. So one day they decided, they talked him in going on the mission. just across the channel, a little milk run. He got back. He was. Well, that's, don't expect any opposition or something. But he said he got back. He was converted.
Yep.
He says, I'm flying through the soup and all the airplanes all together and all this stuff and there's flak over there. And he says, I was on the back floor trying to find a hole to dig,
Yep.
So he had a little different opinion on it.
Why don't we look at what, I see Junior brought a few things too.
Yeah. About the middle of 1945, they moved us up behind Clark Field. The Japanese were still in there. And they were dropping these surrender leaflets on them.
He hasn't got the camera in it yet.
Oh,
Gee, that's a big
boy, that's a unique.
Yeah, that's
We were set up in this valley, and they would come over the mountain. There's a range of mountains there behind Clark Field. And we would just sit there. They somehow they got word to the Japanese soldiers and sailors that were there. If they got to the ocean, there'd be a ship there to take them back to Japan. So they were coming down through the valleys and following the rivers and everything, and we were just sitting there taking prisoners. At one time, they had 15,000 Japanese prisoners in one camp. And they all, looked like enlisted men. And one day they found out there was a general in there in the stockade.
is that right?
Somebody squealed on them. And they had to go through all 15,000 of these guys, and they finally found the general. He was dressed as a private, or whatever they call their lowest rank.
Sure.
Did the officers take their bars off when you went into combat?
Pardon?
Did the officers take their bars off?
Yeah, well, that was something too, The Japanese thought we'd go out on patrol. I was the first scout. Had a first scout and a second scout. And then the officer would come along behind. Well, the Japanese thought the first guy was the officer, They, heck, come on. So they were shooting all the scouts.
Well,
And,
Takes a lot, huh?
yeah. See, I got $4 more a month for being the first scout.
$4 a month.
Yeah, and that was extra, beside the $50.
That was combat pay.
No, well, I got that in the States as soon as I took the job, first scout. But the first night in combat, the runner got killed, platoon runner. So the sergeant came over and says, hey, we got a new job for you. And I said, what's that? He said, you're going to be the runner. I said, okay, what do I do? He said, just stay with me until I need you. Okay. So he said, came to me and he said, here's a message to take over to the officer of another platoon there. So I said, where are they? Well, they're out there someplace. You just take off in that direction and you'll look for them.
We'll find them.
Well, you knew what a runner was then.
That don't sound like a very good job.
No.
And that didn't last too long because the Jeep driver and the transportation corporal were bringing a Jeep back down to the kitchen where they stayed at night. And a Japanese soldier threw a grenade out in the road, and they both got wounded. So they drove right to the hospital. We lost our Jeep. We didn't have our Jeep for 5 days, and when they finally found it, the first sergeant knew I had a driver's license, Army driver license. So he came and asked me if I'd like to drive a Jeep. I said, sure. He said, take it back to the kitchen every night and stay there, and then come up in the morning with food and more ammunition. So that was great. I went back, found a Jeep. It had 36 holes in it from the shrapnel. Water can was gone, everything was gone. No spare tire, nothing on it. And then somebody had stolen the rear shock absorbers off it. Because you couldn't leave anything parked any place. They would steal something off it. So I brought it up in the morning, loaded, and they said, everything's been changed. You'll dig in with the rest of the company tonight. So we parked the Jeep the transportation corporal finally came back from the hospital. The Jeep driver went to the States because he got hurt so bad. So that night we dug a big hole and drove the Jeep over it, and then we crawled and slept under the Jeep for about 5 nights. And then I drove until I got sick. I went to the hospital. Then somebody else got my chief driving job. Then I was a rifleman again. So those gravy jobs don't last too long sometimes.
Yep.
The big map you have, is that of Luzon Island or
Yeah,
the one you're holding?
I don't think it's big enough though. Here. MacArthur wanted Luzon back very bad in Manila. There was 4 divisions that came in on this landing. Right here is where we landed. That's the 11th Corps. I don't know how big a corps is. That's pretty big.
Yeah.
Yep.
And down here, the 11th Airborne came in. I think it dropped on Corregidor. So that's how bad they wanted Luzon back again. They threw a lot of troops in there. The stuff was winding down in Europe, and we started getting replacements then. A lot of our companies were down to very few men left. And then all of a sudden, we start getting replacements. And they even shut down Camp Roberts in California and sent all the cadre over there to us. And of course, they couldn't do the job. They all had a lot of rank. So they start breaking them. And I've got records here which shows that how they reduced them from like sergeant down to private and vice corporal down to private. And I got one of those jobs. I got to be a sergeant, assistant squad leader. And it lasted 3 days. They forgot that they'd promised a company clerk that he could be a sergeant before he went home. So on the, let's see,
Or politics.
15th of September, I was made a buck sergeant. And on the 18th of September, I was reduced to a corporal, and this Corporal Lester Bumpus was promoted to buck sergeant, so I lost that gravy job.
Did you get paid for those 3 days?
No,
You couldn't win.
that's what burnt me up.
Couldn't hold a job down, huh?
And another funny thing, I got all my records from overseas, being in a hospital, and I was in Woods Hospital for 2 months and 3 days, and I asked for my records from Woods Hospital, and they burnt up in a fire in St. Louis.
Yeah, you bet.
That's right.
That's where mine went.
But now they say they're resurrecting a lot of them.
I don't know.
And if you're right, you can get, there's a chance you might get some of them.
The gal that comes down the
I got
senior
transferred
center,
over to an outfit
gal
called the
comes down
Amphibious
senior
Training
center.
He
Command.
did check on
It was over there in
Yeah.
And
a lot of it. I did
so I wanted to,
one record.
where are the
there.
records?
I don't know what it was. now.
because I was actually discharged from the Coast Guard. And so I wanted to try and find out how all this happened. We don't know. We just don't know. They said the records burned up in St. Louis.
Yeah, mine too.
Well, see, these guard divisions,
Except the medical records. I've got all of that stuff.
yeah.
I got all my temperatures for 3 months, I guess, every day. So who cares about that?
Yeah.
I want to hear about you. Doug, you've said that you were just sold cigarettes and candy, but
Yeah.
I think Ralph was telling me about a story where you were left to guard 5 German prisoners.
I didn't
that-
say anything about that.
No? Someone told me
I
that?
had 40 German prisoners.
Was it Chink? No?
Yeah, you were telling me about all that prisoners. I got one here.
I had,
You had one.
the last job I had with Nancy France, I had 40 PWs working in my warehouse. And,
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that's interesting.
Did they stay with you, or did they try to
no, they
escape?
didn't stay with me. They went to the guardhouse every night, and then they'd come in the morning and go to work. And I'd line them up, and then I would say in German, Achtung, arbeiten, muss schnell. That means attention, work fast.
Did you have,
They were darn good workers.
Doug, did you have anti-pilfering signs in your warehouse too?
No, but we had to watch everybody like hawks because, boy, they would
Yeah.
steal like crazy.
They had
Fair share,
signs,
Doug?
Huh?
pilfering
fair
aids
share?
to Jap.
No, no. But boy, it was, well, it's a pretty hard description when you talk about a PX warehouse where you had literally thousands and thousands of cartons of cigarettes piled and the black market out there that would die for it, you know. Cigars and beer piled up. And then these prisoners would steal from you, you know, they'd stick it in the back of their backs. And we had French working for us, and they would have a crew of these prisoners, and they would pick up the rations for each unit and get them all together. And between the two of them, one was as bad as the other. One would steal, and the other would steal for them. And the Americans that we had there, our job was to keep our eye on the people so they didn't steal too much. That was about what it amounted to.
It was interesting. We got back, our landfall was Camp Kilmer. We were there when Roosevelt died. And they shipped us to Fort Sheridan for getting our leave papers. And walk in here, the German prisoners are walking around like they own the place. And here comes a poor GI with a MP with a sawed-off shotgun following this guy around. And the Germans are all out there on their own. Holy cow.
It gets
They had it
messed
pretty
up.
nice, I think.
Oh, they were well taken care of.
It wasn't like these stalags they had over there for our prisoners.
Yeah.
For their
Doug, you
prisoners.
was talking about prisoners there. Here I got a letter dated March 12th, 1945, somewhere in Germany. Of course, everything was censored, you know. You couldn't put where you were or anything like this. Well, here on the bottom part here, it says, last night I sure got a surprise. I was laying in my bed, or I should say on the floor of a house, when in come a couple of guys and says they captured a prisoner. Then they brought the prisoner in, and it turned out to be a girl. Good-looking girl, too. Well, any girl was good-looking then. And,
Bad ones.
and she was pretty good-looking. Then I saw she was a guy in our company dressed up like a girl. Boy, was she, but she still looked like a girl to me. That was one of the funny ones, that was.
Yeah.
And talking about letters here, I got a letter that, I don't know if you guys had them or not, but now they got email.
Yep.
This here is a
V-mail.
V-mail.
Email,
Yep.
yeah.
And this is the way we had to fill this out. And then they shrunk that down to this size.
Well, they sent them out as a film. And then when you got back in the States, then they
print them.
they print them.
But the first letter I wrote, cheapers, most of it, they cut out of it. Because I was putting a lot of stuff in there that I wasn't supposed to.
That's true.
That was
we
it.
really couldn't write about much stuff that we were doing. But this one right here, I'll pass it around, you guys can see it. Maybe you could get that. That's for a Christmas card for my brother. He sent it to me when he was overseas. And a small print on there, I can't see it very good, but if I had a magnifying, we'll drink to the good old days, Chink. And for the, something about some other days or something. But that's what he sent to me, and we got a lot of that stuff like that, didn't we?
Oh, I drew a lot
But
of
you
them.
write on here, and it's, well, of course, I didn't write very good and never did. But here you can read it good, but when they get it down to this size, you can hardly read it.
Wow. Look,
So if you guys want to see that, I'll pass that around.
did you get a good look at it, Dan?
Yeah, the censor, sometimes if you write a letter home, sometimes they cut out half
Oh,
of it.
sure, because they're telling your positions or something.
And then something else that I got. This here says Clarence Estlin from Doug Stockstead.
Hello. Oh, yeah.
And this is a picture of all the fellows,
Paper boys.
yeah, paper boys from the Capital Times. And all of us guys that was in the service.
Am I on there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're on there.
Me,
Leonard's on there, I'm on there, Doug is on there.
Doug is on there, yeah.
What's the date? Is there a date on that?
Oh, let's see now.
Back in,
Well, it must have been early
Must have been
43
around
or something like
35.
that.
It would have to
started
be
back in
43, yeah.
34, 35.
Because I was a
34 and
private.
35.
Yeah.
So that's,
Is that old Will Lindred?
What was I?
We were young
What does it
fellas.
say I'm there? Corporal?
Was it Will?
Private?
Willie
General.
or Will?
General.
Oh, you
I'm
were-
a private, my brother's a private. 3 Stoughton men were in there.
I'm a Norwegian.
See,
Oh, don't give no date on it.
It's probably,
But I think it was 43 or
43,
something
yeah.
like that, yeah.
I just want to ask one question of
were the
everyone.
one
Just, this will be a
squadron,
quick
not a
question.
squadron,
What
not
was
a
the best present you ever got from home? I know they sent you, I know what Don's was. You said you got a bunch of hubs, you got a bunch of newspapers.
But I got a can of sardines down in New Guinea.
Ooh,
Smelled pretty bad, but it was good.
that was a luxury. Does anyone else remember getting a,
I've got a German, someplace around the house, a German industrial flag. Oh, that thing must have been 5 feet tall and maybe about 7 feet long or so. And it's got a big industrial gear in the middle of it, and inside that there is a swastika.
you brought that home with you?
I brought it home with me, yeah.
Wow.
And my wife was going to clean it one day, and she was going to hang it out in the line. I said, you better not do that.
Well, you brought back a tent too, a
Oh,
squad
yeah, I
tent
got
or something
I
like
picked up a
that. No
German...
poles or nothing.
Yeah, a German officer's camouflage tent.
Yeah.
I sent it home. It was just almost like a pup tent, only bigger. Bigger, just like a big pup tent.
And we had to make all new poles for it.
Yeah.
I have a Nazi flag that's as big as this tabletop, maybe a little wider than that.
Yeah.
That it took down. The stoves were still hot. Those guys left in a big hurry, and it was a permanent fort. It wasn't, you know, one of those casual things. And we just pulled the flag down, and being the senior person there, of course, that was a trophy, and I still got it in my. You know, my, what do you call it, the trunks that you had, you know. But I don't dare bring it out. What the hell would I do with it? You know, if I just showed that,
Same way, yeah.
I just have left it. My grandsons want to see it, and I bring it out and show it to them, and I put it right back. Because if somebody thought you were from, you know, down south with this, and had leanings toward the opposition, I thought you might get yourself in trouble. So
Well, we got
You
some
had
Nazi
to put it on a
groups in the
flagpole
United States
sometime,
now.
Yeah.
just see what happens.
pull it out, and have it flying over my house.
Yeah.
Oh boy, they'd like that.
We never seen many German flags over there. All we seen was the white flags.
Yes, coming towards you with on the end of your rifle. You know, they'd come in too to surrender. I've had that happen a few times.
you're asking, Wendy, what's the best things we got from home? I think the letters.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Letters.
Everybody looked forward to getting mail from home.
Yeah.
That was the big thing.
Awful slow, though.
When it caught up with you finally.
You know, I've got quite a few old letters, and in there, every letter I wrote in there, send candy or send
Yeah.
fruit or send, I'm hungry all the time.
Cookies. Yeah.
Especially Milky Ways or something like that. All the time. And then the pen. Pen was another thing. Something to write letters
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
Oh, you
Could have got them at the
nothing like that.
PX.
PX. Where's the PX overseas?
Oh,
Oddvar, you were talking about how close
No
these
wonder
people
we could
got
do it
to live
all
together.
yourself
Yeah.
back there.
I know of several cases where a guy would get a package from home, and he was probably in his bunk sleeping, so his tent mates opened it up and ate most of it, and they saved a cookie for him. There, we said, we saved this for you.
That's
That was, it was
look at
all right. That
yeah.
was family.
You know what happened to me one time? This buddy of mine down in Chicago, his dad had got a great big bottle of these cherries.
Yep.
And he took and dumped all the juice out and then filled it up with brandy. And then put the cap on again, sent it over there. Fellows, look what I got. So he took out a cherry and gave each one a cherry. He says, the booze is mine.
Love that. Well, we've been talking quite a while. I don't know how you guys have done it, but I'm getting kind of tired.
I mean, there's a lot more. There's a lot
There's a
more
lot more.
tales if you could just.
You could go on and on for
Yeah, you could go
hours.
on for a long time, yeah.
Yeah,
This
the
all-
worst battle that you were in, and or that type of thing too, you
A
know.
lot of little funny things too that you could say.
Oh, absolutely. There were humorous things and
We can
something
stretch them a little bit now because there aren't that many left that can say we're wrong.
that nobody's going to contradict you.
There you go.
I think
But I think the best present I ever got, and this, I'm sure same with you guys too, is when I saw the Statue of Liberty coming back home. After
bet.
4 years, we saw it leave in the distance and come back 4 years later and in good health and that.
Yeah.
What the hell better can you get? All of the people that served.
Our was a Golden Gate.
I'll tell you one thing, you guys, though, you all should do what I'm doing.
nice sight.
I'm writing the history of my
No.
World War experiences. I'm almost done with it.
Good for
Taking
you.
me,
You got a
taking
lot of
me 6
energy.
months to do it, but all you people should do the same thing.
I know it.
adjustment and the per member increase all affect the revenue cap, and none of them will be known before September. We project a 45-member increase. The previous year we had 40, and the year before that we had 123. The transfer of service, I talked to a person at DPI, and last week the best estimate they gave me was $58,600. However, that is susceptible to change depending on transfer service means special ed kids that you have to provide service for, either transferring out of your district or in your district, and you get to add or subtract money based on DPI's determination. Pretty much just a variable. The general aid estimate, which is equalization aid, that is based on state aid from DPI. There's one estimate there, Fund 41 amortization. He gave me his best guess, and I put that in there. That could definitely change.
Is the E there?
I believe it was Jim McIntosh. Yes, he's a consultant. The next page, page 7, is a budget summary, which you've seen in the past. The mill rate will go down 10%, 10.78. The debt service part of the tax levy also goes down. It's pretty. You would think that we'd have a big increase in debt service, but we really don't. We're going to be pretty steady for several years, and it's steadily going to go down. We're going to end up using approximately between $520,000 and $525,000 in fund balance in Fund 10 this year, which will put our fund balance at approximately $2.1 million, which is pretty much what the board had decided previously, I believe in May. This budget includes almost $1 million in startup costs, so you can see we're actually doing quite well. And the final page is something that is typically given to the taxpayers in the shopper, I believe, before the annual meeting. And what it basically gives you is a 3-year feeling of how we're doing. Under general fund, you'll see that the fund balance, what we're projecting, is 2.084, which is very close to that 2.1 you were asking for. Lower right-hand corner gives you the mill rate increase. The equalized property value, we're taking a 3-year average at 10.62% increase, I believe. I'm sure you're going to have some questions on page 2, 3, 4, and 5. You want to go through any particular line item?
Why don't we just open it up to questions at this point?
Sure.
Yeah, starting on page 2, and I have several questions.
Okay.
Take turns, I promise, Kathleen. Business Administration Building Projects Fund is down 58%. It looks like it's down about $15 million. What is that?
That is our building fund reference. We start off with 25 million. We spent approximately, 15 of it. Also, that you don't see here, that you'll be showing before the annual meeting, the auditors required that we book the amount that we owe Findor for the remainder of their contract, which is approximately $5 million. So actually, this budget's going to go down to around $5 million. But I just found that out late last week. This budget is up to date as of Wednesday.